So good evening and welcome to the Transfer Show. Coming up, Roy Hodgson offers Calvin Phillips the chance to play football, and it looks as if Ange Postecoglou could continue to reshape his midfield this month. Plus, 24 hours after Everton and Nottingham Forest were charged with breaching the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules, the debate rages on.
It's a handshake between all 20 clubs. All clubs look each other in the eye and say we'll comply with these rules.
The players know the situation, but what I'll tell them is exactly what I'm telling to you. Let's forget about this and focus on our job.
Yeah, very concerned really. You can't not be worried.
I don't think it's come from a bad place. I think it's come from the owners trying to do the right thing for the club, and unfortunately it's gone a little bit wrong.
Does it change at all your plans for this January transfer window?
Not too concerned because I don't think we'll get a 10-point deduction, but 6 points I still think we'll be fine in the battle for the relegation zone.
They tend to always get away with it, the bigger clubs.
If any club, whether they're the current champions or otherwise, had been found in breach of the spending rules for all year 23, they would be in exactly the same position as Everton or Nottingham Forest. There is a date set for that proceeding. Unfortunately, I can't tell you when that is, but that is progressing.
And there's live Africa Cup of Nations football beginning right now. That's over on Sky Sports Football. Tunisia taking on Namibia. We'll have the goals as they go in. Well, we are going to start with Everton and Shawn Dyche, who spoke to the media in the last hour for the first time since the club was charged with breaching the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules yesterday. Vinny O'Connor was in the news conference for us, and we can join him now live. So, Vinny, easy question for you. He's been here before. What was Dyche's reaction to the latest round of charges?
Well, he's mentioned the fact that he's been here around about a year. He, of course, became the Everton manager on the 30th of January last year, and in that time he rightly puts it that he's not received any kind of sporting advantage from the money that Everton have spent to a certain extent, because in the time here obviously Everton have been forced to cut their cloth somewhat, and you're looking at some of the players that Everton have lost in the time that Shawn Dyche has been in charge. I'm thinking about the likes of Alex Iwobi, for instance, Damari Gray, young Ellis Sims and Tom Cannon, of course, were sold on, while the likes of Yerry Mina, Asmir Begovic and Tom Davis all left the club on a free. In fact, in the time that Shawn Dyche has been here at the football club, Everton have recouped, or certainly since last summer, have recouped around £82 million, spending just £40 million. The players that they were able to bring in for Shawn Dyche in the summer, the likes of Jack Harrison and Ono Danjuma on loan, Beto and Chimiti to add to their attacking options as well, although those deals for Beto and Chimiti will be, their first payments of that will be somewhat further down the line. Of course, prior to Shawn Dyche arriving as the Everton manager, Anthony Gordon was sold to Newcastle. That was on the 29th of January. And Richarlison, of course, back in July 22, being sold to Spurs. So in that respect, Shawn Dyche says that he's not received any sporting advantage. And of course, at the same time, Everton are building a brand new stadium as well that is adding not just to the waterfront here on Merseyside, but also to the local economy as well, or certainly will do in the long run. So when Shawn Dyche was asked about the situation Everton find themselves in, he, like everyone else connected with the football club, feels they're being treated a little harshly.
I think it's, I think one of them, a bigger picture view, if you like. You know, I've been here approaching a year, and you know, my timeline, and certainly by the recent stats and facts, I think we're in the, I think it's the bottom 3 or 4 net spend over the last 3 or 4 seasons. So there's a start point of the club motioning to do things correctly. Since I've been here, as you know, we let players go out of contract who some we would have kept, but we couldn't do that. We've been working hard to lower everything here. And we sold 3 young players in the timelines we were given to make sure the money was in. We wouldn't have normally sold them young players, quite obviously. New stadium speaks for itself. The effect that'll have on the city, as much as anything, the Evertonians. The old stadium being developed for good causes, which you certainly know of. Alongside that, trying to still put a team out there that can be competitive, of course, and all the things that go with that, still trying to work within the numbers, signing players who we don't even do deals until they're a year's time, and trying to find ways to still be competitive in as we could do. And then, you know, you sort of end up with an on-pitch sanction, and you're like, well, we're trying to do everything we can to solve all these conundrums. There's mistakes we've made, I'm sure, down the years there has been, but that's natural part of football, particularly with player training. It's not an exact science. Sometimes you put all that in the melting pot. You go, well, there's no on-pitch advantage there. and yet we get a non-pitch sanction. So that is a tough. Who knows what comes next? I think we're all wondering, we're all scratching our heads, and certainly we're hopeful that a change in what's going on occurs, and we get some points back, and it's probably looked at a bit differently.
Dyche had certainly made them competitive as well, not just staving off relegation last season, but even after that 10-point deduction, of course, Everton were able to hold themselves out of the relegation zone. They were at 1 point, 7 points clear of the drop zone, that down to just 1 point at the moment. But of course, immediately after the 10-point deduction, they were beaten by Manchester United, but after that went on that run of 4 consecutive Premier League wins. Of course, it hasn't been plain sailing since then. They suffered 3 straight Premier League defeats, but still the performances were there, certainly against Spurs and against Manchester City as well. Spurs, they could well have come away with all 3 points. The one drop-off really was the defeat to Wolves. But, of course, they got the draw in the Cup against Crystal Palace. A decent draw against Aston Villa at the weekend, which saw Everton just being able to show that spirit of togetherness that has really been a major feature of this season, certainly a major feature under Shawn Dyche. Some people say it's been the 10-point deduction that's galvanised them. I would argue that the performances were there beforehand, but certainly it has had an impact on this group as well, because they know that they're fighting for their lives down at the bottom, or towards the bottom of the table at the moment, and just perhaps that little bit of extra pressure being added with this latest charge. But as Shawn Dyche says, what they will focus on is controlling the controllable, and that will be the performances on the pitch.
Absolutely, indeed. Thank you very much, Vinny. Well, Nuno Espirito Santo was pressed on how much he knew about any potential breaches before he was appointed Nottingham Forest manager in December. And it led to a slightly frosty exchange. Have a listen to this.
Did you know about them before you came to the club?
We know about them before, since I've been in the Premier League. I know that this is the rules.
No, but did you know about the fact that Forest were flying close to possible rule breach?
We know that all the clubs in the Premier League have been really looking close. Everybody's looking close to this situation, and Forest is no exception.
Did you know, though, before you took the job, that the club might...
I just answered. We know that all the clubs have been watched on that aspect. Forest, all the clubs in the Premier League, the Championship, all the clubs, all over the world, the financial fair play is it's an issue.
As you can see, our chief reporter, Kaveh Solokog, joins me now. Kaveh, he was slightly frosty there, but slightly understandable. He's just come into this job and now he's going to be faced with this prospect. We've heard a lot more about the situation with the sale of Brennan Johnson. What more can you tell us on that today?
Yes, this is a development that was sent in by my colleague Rob Dorset today. Basically, the situation was that Nottingham Forest had to make sure that in the 3 seasons ending last June, they did not lose more than £61 million. Now, obviously, it's emerged that they did lose more than £61 million. But last June, they were trying to do something about it to make sure that they didn't exceed that maximum loss. They were trying to sell Brennan Johnson, and they thought they had a deal lined up with Brentford. Brentford wanted to sign him. They were willing to pay £35 million. If that deal had gone through, I think there's a strong possibility that Nottingham Forest would have been in the clear. But the only problem is that Brennan Johnson didn't want to move to Brentford.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not his fault that Nottingham Forest are now in the situation that they're in. He only wanted to move to a so-called Big Six club. And in fact, on deadline day last September, he did get a move. He moved to Spurs for £47.5 million. So Forest ended up getting more money than they were going to get from Brentford, but they couldn't bank that money in their accounts that were submitted to the Premier League for last season. And if they had been able to bank that money, who knows, probably they would have been in the clear. So I think that's one thing that Nottingham Forest lawyers will be bringing up in front of the Commission. They will be saying, look, we knew that we could be in breach of your rules. This is why we tried to sell the player. We did what we could, but unfortunately, we weren't able to. Will that cut any ice with the Commission? Will the Commission just say, look, the rules are the rules. It's in the Premier League. Exactly. It's in the Premier League handbook. You didn't sell him in time, so you're guilty as charged. I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see.
OK, look, what's the reaction from some of the Premier League clubs today? Are they kind of saying, therefore, the grace of God go I, or are they kind of like, actually, you know, the rules are the rules and you should have stuck by them?
Well, look, the Premier League is so competitive that you would expect the clubs, especially some of those clubs towards the bottom of the table, to be thinking, look, this is good news for us. Everton could be getting more points deduction. Nottingham Forest could be getting a points deduction. That suits us. We should be happy about this. I don't know. Maybe behind closed doors they're happy. But the sense I'm getting is that there is some sympathy for these clubs. Some sympathy. Not too much sympathy. I think what most people within Premier League clubs are saying is, look, the rules are the rules. We all agree to them. We have to abide by them. If we have to abide by them, so do Everton and Nottingham Forest. But I think there's sympathy especially for Everton because they've already been deducted 10 points. They may be deducted even more points. There's so much going off the pitch at that club as well, so many financial problems. But I think we have to wait and see how big the breaches were. If the breaches were like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 million pounds, then I don't think there will be any sympathy. But if the breaches are just a couple of £1 million, because there's so many variables in football, it's so difficult to predict how much money you're going to make and how much money you're going to be spending. If it's a couple of £1 million, I think there will be some sympathy.
And if they're kind of doing it for the right reasons, do you understand what I mean by that, Carvey? So they're tweaking the rules because they, need to stay alive. This is what we want. We want a competitive Premier League, don't we? So are these rules kind of working for the right reasons?
They fit for purpose.
Yeah, kind of.
I mean, we could talk about it all night.
Yeah, I have been talking about it all afternoon with my producers.
But I think it depends whether you like the idea of having financial rules at all. Yeah. Because a lot of people, especially Martin Samuel in the Times, argues this very, very well. He says that the Premier League became so big, so successful without these rules. These rules have only been around for 10 years. Now these rules are stopping clubs growing. Yeah. Like Newcastle, like Aston Villa, for instance. Why are English clubs not out there trying to sign Kylian Mbappe? Because the Premier League should be attracting the best players in the world because it is the number one league in the world. The reason is these financial rules. So if you don't like them, of course, you are going to say, look at the chaos it's unleashed. Manchester City being charged, Chelsea being investigated, Forest, Everton. We shouldn't be talking about this. We should be talking about football. We should be talking about great goals, great saves, great games. Not just VAR and accounts and financial fair play and profit and sustainability. But on the other hand, these rules have come in because the clubs want them. The Premier League is 20 clubs. They meet every month. They discuss what rule changes they'd want. And they have agreed to have these rules. And the reason they've agreed to have these rules is because they want the competition to be as fair as possible. They don't want state-owned clubs buying all the best players in the world, hoovering up the talent and making it uncompetitive.
I get that, but just very briefly, I was talking and equating it to an overdraft facility, OK? I don't want to always use my overdraft facility, but sometimes I have to because unforeseen circumstances happen, and I might just go to that overdraft facility, and sometimes I might even go over it, but then I'll come back. So should there be any wiggle room?
But you'll overdraft £105 million over 3 seasons. That's a lot of people would say £105 million is a lot of money.
But they're dealing with a lot.
Seasons.
They're not just talking about shopping in Marks and Spencer's, which I do. There are other availability for other shops. But you see what I'm saying? It is a lot of money, but we're talking about millions and millions of pounds when we talk about transfers as well. So should there be wiggle room? Should they put a buffer in this £105 million?
I think that's a great point, and I think that's something that Everton and Nottingham Forest will probably argue in front of the Commission, and they will say they are mitigating circumstances. It is not easy to, make sure that you don't go over the limit, especially if you've only gone over the limit by a few £1 million. So, no, that is a very good point, and it's up to the Commission, which is independent, to decide whether they accept any of the sort of arguments that Everton and Nottingham Forest will be coming up with. But I agree, I think the bottom line is we don't want to be talking about all this. No. We want to be talking about football. We want to look at the league table and say the league table reflects what happened on the pitch, not what happened behind closed doors with accountants poring over spreadsheets with their calculators.
I couldn't agree more, Carvey. You talk a lot of sense, as always. Right, I think. Look, the Premier League CEO, Richard Masters, has also said today that a date has been set for Manchester City's hearing over those 115 alleged breaches of the league's financial rules, but would not reveal when.
if any club, whether the current champions or otherwise, had been found in breach of the spending rules for full year 23, they would be in exactly the same position as Everton or Nottingham Forest. But the volume and character of the charges laid before Man City, which I obviously cannot talk about at all, are being heard in a completely different environment. There is a date set for that proceeding. Unfortunately, I can't tell you when that is, but that is progressing.
Stay with us, because on the way we're going to be focusing on transfers with Tim Thornton and Michael Bridge. And we're going to be hearing from Roy Hodgson, who's invited Calvin Phillips to end his troubled time at Manchester City. Roy Hodgson has admitted Crystal Palace would be interested in signing Calvin Phillips on loan and believes that Palace could offer him the perfect route into Gareth Southgate's Euro squad. But he knows they won't be the only club interested.
Once again, there'll be financial restrictions. Who knows whether the club feels that they can afford that. But if you're talking about the level of player, I don't think there'll be many managers who would not say, yeah, we'd be really happy to have him come to the club. If they are purely going to sell him, then I wouldn't think we would be in the market. What we could then, of course, offer is, probably the chance of playing regular football in the Premiership in the build-up to what is going to be a very important summer for England and obviously for him. But we might not be the only club in that position.
And as you can see, Michael Bridge and Tim Thornton have joined me here. So, Michael, firstly to you, it's really refreshing to hear from a manager talk so openly about another player.
Absolutely, yeah. And, Crystal Palace, it'd be a great signing for them. I think an issue maybe for Crystal Palace and other clubs who would be keen on Calvin Phillips potentially might be how much of a fee they'd pay to Manchester City.
Yeah.
We know that Calvin Phillips would be a fantastic signing for so many clubs, including Crystal Palace. He'd get so much game time. He'd probably play in every game. He might be one of the first players on the team sheet. I think this is one where we've said day after day a potential final week transfer / loan, even a deadline day one potentially.
Yeah, it's interesting though. I guess this move for Calvin Phillips has got to be all about his potential to be in the England squad. Is that going to be in the forefront of his mind at the moment?
My understanding of the situation is that Calvin Phillips just wants to play football.
Right.
It's been hugely frustrating for him at Manchester City. He's 28 now, so these are his peak years coming up. So I think it's really important for him that he goes to a club where he plays. But we know there are several clubs that are interested in him. Roy Hodgson and Crystal Palace are the first to really put their hand up and say, yeah, it's a possibility. I think it would be a good option for both of them. But I think this could be a waiting game, because there are so many different clubs that are interested. Calvin Phillips is assessing his options. We know that Newcastle, for example, now have got an injury with Joe Linton, so that could change the landscape again. So this could change over the next few days and over the next couple of weeks. But key to any decision, I think, for Calvin Phillips will be playing regular football ahead of the Euros, because he wants to be in Gareth Southgate's team in Germany, as simple as that.
Yeah, and I found it fascinating today, the fact that Roy Hodgson came out so vociferously and spoke about it. It's kind of like getting it into his mind as well, with all these clubs interested in him.
It's Roy Hodgson reveals day today, I think, as well. He was saying, people asking about the right-back they've been linked with in Belgium, Daniel Munoz. He said, yes, I know him, I like him. Eddie Nketiah, of course he knows Eddie Nketiah. He likes him as well. So it's very refreshing. But look, just going back to him, I think it's clear admission that this is a player that would improve the squad, the team, Crystal Palace. But as we say...
There's always a transfer saga, of course. This could be it in this window.
Yeah.
This could be the one that we're talking about all month.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. OK, let's turn our attention to Manchester United, because Sir Jim Ratcliffe has met with the Manchester United supporter groups. He's told them that everything must be focused on creating winning teams on the field. Now, Ratcliffe met with the members of the club's Fans Advisory Board and leaders of the Manchester United Supporters Trust alongside Sir Dave Brailsford. Now, Tim, look, you've been out in Nice, where, of course, Sir Dave Brailsford and Sir Jim Ratcliffe have been involved in the club. I mean, they haven't been performing as well as perhaps you might expect with these two at the helm.
Yeah, well, it's been a process.
Yeah.
They were in European competition. It was a struggle last season, but they're second in the table right now in France. So, yeah, you could see the vision. I spoke to Sir Dave Brailsford when I was out there, and he admitted that he wasn't necessarily an expert on football when he went into Nice, but he's an expert on elite sport, and he made the point that if he didn't know something, he'd ask somebody who knew the answer to what he wanted. And I think that will be the process here. He'll speak to people within football. He's gathered knowledge during his time at Nice. He'll continue to do that, and he'll make good, sound decisions for Manchester United that will move the club forward. But, of course, he's used to being in a winning environment where his teams are winning, and I think he'll take that culture to Manchester United. But he's a really impressive guy, really impressive, and I think he'll make a big impact at Manchester United.
We know what Sir Dave Brailsford is all about as well. It's those fine margins as well. I was lucky enough to sit down with Erik ten Hag on Friday and talk about what the problem is for them at the moment. And he was talking about the fine margins, the fact that young players haven't quite hit their mark yet, and so many injuries. So is that something they're going to have to really look at in increasing the forensic details?
Yeah, he'll go into every detail. He'll analyse different things, and he'll work out how to get the best out of the players who are already at the club. I think that's one of his big strengths. But he'll also look at recruitment. When he was at Nice, they brought a lot of British players in initially. Some of those worked out, some didn't. But yeah, I think he'll look at all the little details, get them right, and try step by step to move Manchester United forward. That's what's happened at Nice. They're in a good situation now. Manchester United fans will be hoping that in a year, 2 years, they will be in a good position as well.
I'm going to put you right on the spot. We've only got a few seconds left, I think. Aston Villa, they made a signing. Yeah, sorry. Tell me what it is.
Costa Nedljakovic, right back from Red Star Belgrade, 18 years of age. More at 7 o'clock, and our transfer shows around 7.8. Fee agreed. The right back off to Villa, but he might stay in the summer in Serbia until the summer.
Yeah, he's going to stay on loan, isn't he? I think
yes.
as well. OK, brilliant stuff. Sorry, I gave you no time to do that. It was very cheeky of me. OK, stay with us because the transfer show is back at 7 o'clock. Next, though, we're going to have plenty more on the appearance of the Premier League Chief Executive Richard Masters in front of this parliamentary committee today. Plus, where next for Jose Mourinho after his sacking from Roma? Stay with us for that.